Number two while we're waiting.
Do you need lights?
Yeah, we can raise the lights.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Okay, here we go. Here's our first question. Is there a better set of English and math standards, and what do you recommend?
Yes, there are. I'm not sure this is. No. All right. Try this. Yeah. That's
Hold it
better.
close.
What?
Hold it close.
I am, okay, I can hear the echo. There are several good sets of English standards. One of the excuses that is being made about why you need to keep Common Core is that it would take years to develop a new set of standards. That's not true. You could spend 2 days, and that was it. You could adopt California's old English language arts standards. You could adopt Indiana's 2006 English language arts standards, all rated first class. Massachusetts 2001, and I have made a compressed version available of that set of standards dated 2013, and it was just recently adopted in March by the Wakefield, New Hampshire School Board. So it is alive and working. This is a tiny town in New Hampshire that refused to adopt Common Core because they looked into the statutes and found that indeed New Hampshire towns can adopt any set of standards, any set of curriculum, and a representative told me that when the test comes, Smarter Balanced refused to give that test too. That remains to be seen, but that's what he has told the school board. So this brave little school board that I spent 2.5 hours with 2 weeks ago up in Wakefield, New Hampshire, is moving ahead with a better set of English and math. And in math, they adopted the old Massachusetts math standards, but one could adopt the old California math standards, which were considered the best in the country, or the Indiana 2006. Professor Milgram also helped to advise on those Indiana 2006 standards. In math, there is no reason to rediscover the wheel. Math is pretty much the same where it should be. Good math standards, as Tolstoy put it all, happy families are the same, all good math standards should be the same. So this is with apologies to Tolstoy. So you could get a good set of math standards overnight just by adopting what's out there. No reason to have to spend time going from K to 1 to 2 to work them out. Yes, you can make tweaks. Your teachers can decide if they want to move a standard up or lower, or whatever they want to do to tailor it to a state. But they're all written out. They've all been vetted by mathematicians, so they're there. You don't have to spend time redoing it. You want to use this?
I think I have this. Okay, so, and I'll tell you, Dr. Stotsky said at the forum last fall at the legislature, and I'll hold her to it if we ever get this chance, that she would be willing to come in gratis to help rewrite Arizona's standards. This question is, no more calculus in high school, question mark? When was it stopped? No trig, question mark. I don't know, Dr. Milgram, you want to?
I guess I better answer that. I think if we're going to get this working, Zev has it. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. When was it stopped? Well, the answer is not when was it stopped. When will it stop? And the answer there is this. In a state like California, we force the poorest districts to have calculus courses because they were part of the standards. Students weren't obliged to take calculus, but we insisted in California that students would if they wanted to take calculus, they would be able to. And every district in the state was obliged to hire calculus teachers. Calculus teachers are expensive and they're of limited use from the perspective of many high schools. And so what happens when they're not required, when you have standards that say, gee, we don't want to go beyond Algebra 2, and nothing is forcing us to, what happens is really very simple, and this is more so in the weakest districts, the districts with the least funding. What happens is, boy, the minute that teacher indicates, well, you know, I think I'm getting tired of this, I want a higher wage, by God, the answer to that is, bye. And so they disappear. They disappear, individual by individual. And calculus becomes inaccessible. So once you've got standards that say, we're not obliging anybody to do anything beyond the weak Algebra 2 course, then the reality is you're not going to see more than a weak Algebra 2 course. And this is especially true in the poorest districts.
Thank you, Doug. Jennifer, you have another question or two? We've got a whole basket of questions here. What does the National Council of Teachers of English have to say about Common Core?
The NCTE has played a very ambivalent role. It was expecting to be at the table when Common Core was being developed, and soon realized that the reduction in literary study was not something their own teachers were going to be happy with. It has ended up, when I last looked, which is about last year, with a position that they neither support nor oppose Common Core. In other words, they're trying to sit on the fence. They are going to support English teachers in the age of Common Core. So that is how they have decided politically to handle this hot potato, because they have had resolutions against Common Core, and there are many radical members of NCTE who don't like testing to begin with and don't like standards at all, and I remember them 20 years ago. So they're still very unhappy campers, and this organization doesn't know what it can do about it.
Great, thank you, Dr. Stotsky. It looks like we're ready to roll here.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. We moved from Windows to Linux, and some magic and some sweat and it works. So thank you. I will. I will start with a clarion call for the Common Core standards. I hope my accent will not disturb you too much. Oh, clearly it's not from California, even though I came from California. I grew up in Israel. The Benchmarking for Success was a document published in the fall of 2008, just as Obama was coming into his term, and it basically made a call for Common Core standards for all states. And this is what it said. I'm kind of magnifying the piece that is interesting, and it says, action item 1 is upgrade state standard by adopting the Common Core of internationally benchmarked standards in math and language arts for grade K-12 to ensure that students are equipped with the necessary knowledge and skills to be globally competitive. Sounds wonderful. And what is the definition of rigor? As you see this down the same page. By 8th grade, students in top-performing nations are studying algebra and geometry, while in the US, most 8th grade math courses focus on arithmetic. In fact, the curriculum studied by the typical American 8th grader is 2 years behind the curriculum being studied by 8th grader in high-performing countries. Exactly true. So this is a call why we need supposedly higher achieving standards. Well, this is what we ended up with. We ended up with 8th grade that is not algebra, despite the call for algebra in 8th grade. We have pre-algebra in 8th grade. People will tell you, oh, but it has some algebra. Sure, the third grade standard also has some algebra. This is pre-algebra course. Common Core, Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 are reserved for high school. That delays the growth of students. And in fact, the algebra that we get there even is not really the traditional algebra, but we get kind of a variant. I call it here functional algebra. And there is a missing content in algebra 2. Jim Milgram mentioned it before as a weak algebra 2, missing content. And even the highest content, all of the content of high school math, beyond algebra 2, because there is some left over that's supposed to be just for extra, for accelerated students, it's fall short of pre-calculus. That's the highest aspiration of Common Core, falling short of pre-calculus. And here is Jason Zinda, one of the principal authors, last year saying, if you want to take calculus your freshman year in college, you will need to take more mathematics than is in the Common Core. Very simple. They lie. Now, a lot of people hear algebra in grade 8. This is, why? Why do we care? Yes, so other people maybe are doing this in Singapore, say, or Japan. How important it is. Who cares? We have 4 years for high school. That's plenty of time for doing algebra and algebra 2 and calculus if you really insist. What the big deal? Why do you push us? Well, we had an experiment in, go back, supposed to go forward. Sorry. Okay. Let me go here, adjust a few things. California was an interesting experiment, and I come from California, so it's easy for me to talk about the data there. California, in 1997, passed new set of rigorous standards, widely acknowledged as the best standard in the country. And they expected students in 8th grade to take algebra. They didn't force it. Students had to be ready. Not ready students did take algebra. But over time, we hope students will be ready. This is the distribution of schools taking algebra in grade 8. And what you see here is that as you go farther right here on the bottom, this is a higher percentage of students taking algebra in grade 8. And the higher you go on the vertical scale, the better achievement is of this cohort. And it's what you would expect. The more people take algebra, the lower the score. Kind of unsurprising. That's how we started. This was 2004. A year later, 10 years later, nice now. Okay, this is the picture 10 years later. Look at the major change. A lot of schools take close to 100% kids taking algebra by grade 8, and many of them are successful. Not all. A lot of people do it well, a lot of other people didn't learn how to do it well, but it's doable. Many schools have advanced average score, which is wonderful, and take very high fraction of students into algebra. Okay, sounds good. This is how the two pictures look together, doesn't matter. Okay, this is the same number in bar chart, and you see the fraction of the cohort going up, taking algebra 2 by grade 8, and the upper color, the orange piece, is the successful student, taking proficient and above. So those are successful takers, not only the middle, which is basic, and the bottom orange, the pink is kind of below basic. And you see the numbers are growing. And the same thing on the bottom are the absolute number of students. More than 100,000 students more take successfully algebra by grade 8. Okay, big deal. What we really care is how they do in high school. Indeed. Okay, this is the same picture in high school. Algebra 2 by grade 11. You see the numbers grow and the success rate grows. So indeed, at least up to algebra 2 level, the early taking of algebra translated into growth in algebra 2. Let's see how different demographic groups changed over the same 10 years. And you see the blue is the early 2003, the reddish is the 2012. Notice, all of them increased, but the minority achievement increased much faster. Look at the white increased almost double, but you look at the low SES student, it was 6 times higher in algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry. Look how about BC and AP calculus. The numbers again increase, and again, the numbers of minorities grow much faster. So this is exactly what early achievement, early algebra offers you. It offers you higher achievement in high school. Exactly what one would expect. Well, let's not go there. Maybe this is something important. Not this, or this. The key to this success really was that the K-7 standards prepared everyone for taking algebra in grade 8. Not everybody learned enough to be ready to take algebra, indeed, but the numbers were very big. Over 2/3 of California cohort eventually still took algebra by grade 8. Now the numbers are going to drop like a stone. Until last year, 2/3, and it kept growing as you saw. Today, it's common core. The K7 common core does not prepare every student to take algebra. They say, oh, but you can accelerate. Sure you can. Who will accelerate? Not the disadvantaged student, the student that will get support outside the curriculum, outside the schoolhouse, by tutors, by siblings, by father, by mother, not the disadvantaged students. That's what Common Core does. They say, oh, but this is the floor. Indeed, and overwhelmingly, the students from disadvantaged background are taught to the floor. Okay, Jim already quoted Jason Zimba, that those standards are good for some colleges, for the colleges most kids go to, but not for the colleges most parents aspire to. And Bill McCallum, again, is saying a similar thing. The standards are not at the level we aspire for our children. They admit it. It's not me arguing this. Now, I was on the California committee that evaluated the Common Core standard. We had to add, and we agreed to add, a full course in calculus, in advanced statistics, and we made major supplementation to missing content in Algebra 2 and trigonometry. We also, not we here, but I and my colleague of mine, we try also to get some changes that will prepare more students for this in elementary grades. This was rejected because there were grade by grade tests and everybody was afraid of pushing too much because, hey, we are testing on this, so why should we push more?
Right.
Very disappointing. But at least in high school, we offer much bigger breadth and depth. That someone like California, some state like California take just vanilla Common Core. Now, I wanted to touch on a few things. How am I on its time? 10 minutes, okay. The point is not only with algebra, in early algebra or algebra in grade 8. This is just a nice, big sign. Look, it's a weak system. But the problems, the weaknesses of Common Core go across the grades. Interestingly, in the early grades, it's actually very demanding. Too demanding. In later grade, it slowed down. Very much so. That by grade 8, we are about 2 years indeed behind our international high achievers. Let's see, let me show you something here, and you cannot see much, but I kind of try to trace that it's simple addition and subtraction. Because when you talk to Common Core proponents, they will say, you know, we expect fluency with standard algorithm in Common Core, and most state standard didn't expect this. And they are right. They did it a bit late. They did it in grade 4, the last line on the bottom. Meanwhile, they filled the 3rd grade before them with a variety of pedagogy that is not necessarily helpful for developing proficiency and fluency with standard algorithm. So yes, they dropped the last standard at the bottom, much later than other high-achieving nations. But they fill in the time in between with a lot of confusing pedagogy, and then somehow magically they expect that it will happen in grade 4. We'll see, I doubt it will. Let me give you some examples. Here is a kindergarten standard that is actually too demanding. The blue part, the recording composition and the composition by equations in an abstract form, is completely inappropriate for kindergarten. Some kids may do it, most kids cannot, and there is no reason to expect them. They are at their concrete level. They cannot connect, 3 apples is 7 apples, is 3 plus 7 equal 10. There are no apples in the 3 plus 7 equal 10. What is this strange equal sign? It's not for them. And here is grade 1 study. Grade 1 sounds good. Add and subtract within 20, demonstrating fluency with addition subtractions within 20. You know what? Not bad. Pretty good. Except that the standard didn't end up. Use strategies such as counting on, making 10, decomposing number leading of 10, blah, 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 using the relationship, blah, 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 and creating DC1 standard. So they say, oh, fewer, deeper. This is 6 standards. Except that this standard, Jim says, it's 80% of content in first grade, really. That's what you want to spend time on. 80% on this one, so-called one standard. But there are 20 other standards. This is the fewer and deeper. It's ridiculous. Okay, now I have a couple of minutes. I wanted to talk about international benchmarking. There have been multiple studies done, maybe half a dozen by now, how truly rigorous Common Core is as compared to other high-achieving nations. All of them found Common Core below, with one exception. Bill Schmidt, the Schmidt here in the scene, did a study a couple of years back, and published a couple of years back, and he did find that they are on par with international high-achieving. The only study, Bill Schmidt happened to be one of the people in the validation committee also of the Common Core, who signed off that they are excellent, but he's highly qualified, don't laugh. He is a serious person, I'm not joking here. He did the original 1995 TIMSS, Self-International Math and Science study that actually found US falling behind, and he was the US coordinator. So he published a lot of work there, and he basically took the Common Core and mapped them very similarly what he did in 1995 when he mapped the high-achieving TIMSS countries, and he wanted to show they are the same. So this is here I'm explaining about the TIMSS. It's basically about 40 countries participated in that time. Schmidt and his colleagues took the 6 top-achieving nations, analyzed the curriculum, and they called them the A-plus countries. Those are the A-plus country curricula, and the presumption is that people that want to be like them should similarly adjust the curriculum to be like those. Okay. This is how the original themes ranking or grading, or table if you wish, was coded. You basically have a list of topics at every row, and you have the grades one through 8 as a column. And every place where you have a dot is basically where most of these 6 countries, 8+ countries, had this particular topic. So, as you see, it seems very logical, and it probably is. It was highly analyzed, as it was praised and such. So it starts with early grades with just 3 main. Then in second grade are also 3. Then in third grade maybe are 6, 7. And you kind of see that at a certain point they drop the early topics. And it's very rational table looking. And it's important to look at this because the order of the topics, the order of rows, is the coherence. The more difficult are hierarchical and depend on the earlier one, the less difficult. So the more difficult go down, the easier up. Each column has not too many dots that show the focus of the curriculum. You don't have too many topics every year. And if you have not too many topics, you can afford to go deep. So this is an exemplary kind of curriculum. Good. So he took Common Core, and here is his chart, his own chart, was his chart of Common Core. And you know what? It looks about the same. It makes sense. Look, it's coherent. Look, it's focused. Look, it's kind of same shape. And he talks in his paper and his presentation of the shape. Look at shape, it's very similar. That's why it is indeed supposedly on par with high achieving nations, right? Makes sense. There is minor problem. Let me put this. This is the same 2 tables that you saw before. The left one is the themes, the right one is the common core. But now I colored the rows in the original order, and I kept the same colors on the other side. Notice that he hashed the order. Suddenly, topics like, if I go to this side, here, you have 3D geometry showing up before 2D geometry basic. Where is the coherence on that? You have relations of fractions, of common fractions and decimals, before decimal fractions are even taught. He completely messed up the coherence. And, you know, with any curriculum, truly, as long as you don't care about the order of the row, you can achieve a triangular shape. Just makes no sense. But that's what he did. And then he proudly concluded there being no major difference between the 2 sets of standards, evidence that CCSM are coherent and very consistent with the international benchmark. So this is the proof of international benchmarking of common core. All the other 5 studies said not even close. I think I'm done here, and I hope you enjoyed my weird accent, and thank you for your time.
Well, we're going to take a few minutes, and I guess there were some invited candidates here, so first would be Diane Douglas, who is a candidate for the Superintendent of Public Instruction. She's the head of the, which is the head also of the Arizona Department of Education. And that's important for you to know because that gets at really who adopts these standards and will, I'm going to say it this way, will enforce these standards. Diane Douglas' formal education consists of an associate degree in business from Somerset County College and a bachelor's of science in business marketing from Rutgers University. She served as a board member of the Peoria Unified School District from 2005 to 2012 and as president of the Peoria School Board from 2008 to 2009. She has studied the history of the American education system and the federal government's ever-increasing intrusion into our local control since the early 1990s. She understands states' rights and why it is so important to have local control over education. Diane Douglas.
Thank you very much. Everybody hear me? I think I'll just share a little bit. So much that I talk about Common Core has already been explained to you, but let me begin with a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Diane Douglas. I'm running for Superintendent of Public Instruction. My family, which is my husband and our daughter, moved here from what I fondly refer to as the People's Republic of New Jersey back in 1990. Any other refugees in the room? Don't see anybody tonight. We moved here not because we happened to be transferred here or because we were forced to come here. We came here, we visited Arizona, we looked around, and we said, this is where we want to raise and educate our daughter. And I'm so disappointed when I hear our education system disparaged the way that it is. Our daughter got a great education here. They spend a lot of money on education in New Jersey. I would not have had her in those schools. And we're very thankful and very blessed by what has occurred while we've been here in Arizona. And we're expecting our first grandchild, so we're very excited about that too. Thank you. So, oh my goodness, how am I going to get that child through the education system? But what I discovered, I went to a PTA meeting one night when she was in second grade, and before that I did what all moms did. I volunteered for bake sales, got on the PTA, helped at the carnival, helped at the book sale, all that stuff. But one night I went to school, and our principal stood up and told us how proud he was to tell us that we had a K-8 school, in 5th through 8th grade, some astronomically high number of the students had earned what was called a certificate of merit or higher. I had a second grader, I didn't know what that meant, so I turned and I asked, and they told me it wasn't that those children had B averages or higher, they had all B's or higher on their report card, and I can remember sitting there, I can still picture the room when I closed my eyes thinking, holy cow, they're cooking the books. Because you can't have 65, 75, 85% of the students in the top 20 percentile of performance unless something is happening that's out of the ordinary. So it sparked a passion in me to understand our American education system, not just curriculum and things, but what did our founding fathers intend? How did we get the system that it has evolved into being? Quite frankly, how did we go from being the best in the world at educating our children to mediocre at best? One of the things I wanted for my daughter from our education system was that she would become a knowledgeable adult, have a lot of academic content knowledge and rigor, that they would help rather than hinder me instilling morals and values in my daughter and not fight against our family values, and that they would prepare her to be a well-educated, self-governing American citizen who understands the liberty and the blessings of this country and would help perpetuate them when she became an adult. And I think that's what most Americans still want from their education system. I believe that's what most Americans think we're getting from our education system. Unfortunately now, we have a system that all too often refers to our children as human capital and thinks that just enough education to hold a job is sufficient. And I don't believe that's what any of us ever intended. You know, I started looking into the history. This is not a partisan issue. Both sides are equally culpable. If you look back over the history of since the 1960s, starting with Lyndon Johnson and his Great Society, every president has tried to grab a bigger and bigger role in our education. Just kind of in a nutshell, and I want to share with you some of the things that are going on here in Arizona too. But the difference, people ask me, what's the difference between No Child Left Behind and Common Core, what we're doing now? Well, first of all of them are unconstitutional. The federal government has no role to play within the education system.
But the difference with No Child Left Behind is that the federal government set up goals that we had to reach. But we reached them using our own standards that were written and created here in Arizona, that could be applied as we wanted them here in Arizona, and could be changed if we needed to upgrade them here in Arizona. What has happened now with the Common Core standards is we're being told not only this is what you will do, this is how you will do it, and it will be the same regardless of what state you're in. I wanted to talk to just for a few minutes about our State Board of Education, because that is instrumental in helping fix this problem. I see 3 ways that we can go about fixing the problem with Common Core. We can do it through the governor's office, and it is imperative that we elect a governor who's willing to put control of the Arizona education system back into the hands of Arizona. That has to happen. You've already heard we can do it legislatively. In the 2013 legislative session, there was basically one bill, if you set aside any budgeting process, that dealt with Common Core, House Bill 2425, and basically that empowered the State Board of Ed to do more with Common Core and testing. But last year, this past session that just closed, we had, I believe it was 6 bills opposing Common Core. And one of them made it to the governor's desk. Unfortunately, she vetoed it. But that is a monumental swing in just 1 year's time. So that's another way. The other way to fix it is through our State Board of Ed. That is constitutionally mandated. We have 11 members. And one of the issues there's a couple of issues with our State Board of Ed. First of all, it is not constitutionally comprised, if you will. We're entitled, as citizens of Arizona, to have 4 lay members on that State Board of Education. Right now, we have all education insiders who are putting their goals and their dreams for education, if you will, ahead of you and your children. You know, people ask me, they say, or comment to me that I'm a quote-unquote one-issue candidate because my big issue is Common Core. Make no mistake. Common Core is the title, Common Core is what's coming from the federal government, but the one issue in this election is to whom does the education of our children belong? I'm tired of education, the ivory tower of education, colleges of education, telling us what they want to do with our children. We should be telling them what we expect for our children. They shouldn't be telling us what we must accept and how they want to experiment with our children. So we have to and what we have seen happen with our State Board of Ed, and with it being inappropriately membered, if you will, is that they are putting so many unelected boards ahead of you and your locally elected school board. We have the Arizona Ready Council, used to be called the P20 Council, which literally came right out of the DNC playbook, and every state had one, and its goal was to not set policy, because they don't have the authority to set policy, but they guide and control policy from behind the scenes. P stands for preschool, 20 stands for grade 20. That's the influence they want them to have. And talk about conflict of interest. We have the Expect More Arizona, we have First Things First, we have the Chamber of Commerce telling us how we must educate our children, and they have phenomenal amounts of money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in order to do public relations, to convince us these unvetted, unproven things are better for our children. In the professional side, we have the Arizona School Board Association. One of the things I want to do when I'm your superintendent is I want to set up alternate training for our school board members. Because what we do right now is you elect people at the local level on your school board to go represent you. They go to the Arizona School Board Association to get training. And I can tell you from personal experience, what the Arizona School Board Association tells them is your job is to hire the superintendent and then get out of the way and let them do what they want to do. If they want you to vote yes, you vote yes. If they want you to vote no, you vote no, but you implement their policy. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the tail wagging the dog. You elect your local members, they're your neighbors, they are supposed to be listening to you. They are supposed to be hearing what you want for your children and your grandchildren, and then they are supposed to be directing the superintendent that that's the direction that our children are supposed to go. Just let me touch on one or two more things really quickly. Another thing you must understand, there's so much more than just Common Core with the Race to the Top application. The federal government is telling us Common Core is how we must educate our children and the testing that comes along with it. They also tell us how we are to evaluate and compensate our teachers. They tell us how we are to evaluate our schools, the A, B, C, D, F letter system that we changed to. But the last part I'll touch on just very briefly is probably the most insidious, which is the data collection they are mandating on our children. We were mandated to create what's called a statewide longitudinal data system. And just to conclude, I want to read to you from the Department of Labor what their intentions are, is to work with the state's statewide longitudinal data system to follow individuals through school and into and through the workforce, beginning pre-K through post-secondary, through entry and sustained participation in the workforce. This is from the Federal Department of Labor's website, their mission statement for their, they call it their Workforce Data Quality Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what they do in Communist China. Communist China is where our current superintendent of schools, Mr. Huppenthal, was sent to evaluate their system and bring back ideas for our education system. I don't make promises, but I will promise you this. As your superintendent, I am never going to go to a communist country to see how they educate their children because I don't care. More freedom, more blessings that have been bestowed upon this country across the world than any other nation in the history of mankind, and that's what I want for our students here in Arizona, to return with that. So with that, I see I kind of got the hook, and I will be delighted to answer any questions when the time comes.
And now, Frank Riggs is a candidate for governor of Arizona. For the past 16 years, Frank Riggs has been a leader in Arizona and nationally in the effort to expand parental school choice and reform and improve K-12 education, both as a U.S. Congressman and as the CEO of the largest nonprofit dedicated to helping public charter schools finance and build facilities. The Conservative Heritage Foundation said, quote, Representative Riggs spearheaded many cutting-edge initiatives like school choice and charter schools, close quote. Riggs has promised to repeal Arizona's participation in Common Core, to protect local control of standards and assessments, parental rights, and charter school autonomy, and to reassert Arizona's state sovereignty and responsibility for K-12 education. Mr. Frank Riggs.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be with you back cleanup after this very distinguished academic panel. I don't know about you, but whenever the conversation gets into high math, my palms begin to sweat. Full disclosure, I'm sorry, to this day. But thank you. It was very, very educational, and nice job, Diane. She just gets better every time I hear her. She's going to be extraordinary superintendent of public instruction. Out with that guy, I don't even want to say his name, but out with that guy who referred to us all as barbarians. You bet we are when it comes to the education of our kids, and in some people's cases, their grandkids. And thank you, Andy, great job. You can see why he was elected by his colleagues as the president, the leader of the state senate, because he has a unique ability to facilitate communication and move towards consensus. And there is a consensus emerging in our state, which is we want nothing to do with Common Core. So I'm going to be brief. I just want to tell you a little bit about my biographical background. I also should do a couple of shout-outs, I think, here real quick here. Brad McQueen, the author of The Code of Common Core. Man, it truly has the courage of his convictions, continuing to teach in one of our fine public schools. I see Anita Christie, who does a beautiful, fact-based, well-researched blog called both Gilbert and Gila, as in Gila County Watch, and is written prolifically in the subject. My friends from Northwest Conservatives down in Tucson, whose endorsement and support I'm honored to have, and I'm very honored to have the endorsement and support of Arizonans Against Common Core. I just want you to know I'm a proud Army veteran. I'm the only veteran running for governor. I'm a former police officer and deputy sheriff who married a police officer, my wife at the back, my wife Kathy of 34 years, native daughter, born in Tucson. And for a nice little bit of symmetry, last week Kathy and I welcomed our third grandchild into the world, Savannah Elizabeth Riggs, who, like her paternal grandmother, will now be a native daughter of Arizona. So, and really, when we got the news that our son Matt and his beautiful wife Erin, our daughter-in-law, obviously, were expecting over the holidays last year, that was, I think, the final motivation I needed to become a candidate for the highest office in our state. After spending these last 16 years, Andy talked about it, joking all the while that I was a recovering politician. But I just think the stakes for our state and our country are so great that we have to have a proven, tested, and trusted leader at the helm. And someone, by the way, who's not running for governor because it's a vanity candidacy. This isn't about my ambition, my ego. It isn't about the next elective office or re-entering politics for the long term. It's about doing the right thing, demonstrating the courage to make the tough but very necessary decisions, one of which will be using the executive authority of the governor's office to repeal our participation in Common Core on the very law. Now, Diane said she doesn't make promises. I do make some promises. I've made several promises in my life. I've taken oaths. And an oath is a promise. It's a vow. I took an oath when I voluntarily enlisted in the United States Army. I took an oath when I became a police officer, pinned on the badge, the law enforcement oath of honor to protect and serve the public, put literally my life on the line if necessary. I took an oath when I was sworn into Congress. And I actually took a fourth vow when I married Kathy 34 years ago. But when I give my word, when I make a promise, you can take it to the bank. And I'm going to push back hard against the federal government. And I'm going to stop the federalization, what I call the Obamanization of Arizona. And you have my word on that, my oath. And while you know, I want to make our state less, not more dependent on the federal government, I want to stand firmly for the 10th Amendment, for state sovereignty. I want to reclaim our legitimate responsibility, as Senator Burgess well knows, for K-12 education. While I think it is important to have a governor who will stand firmly on that, I also think it'd be a very good thing for Arizona's next governor to have successful experience serving in the United States Congress as a proven reformer and leader in that body. In my third and final term as the United States Congressman, Newt Gingrich, Speaker Gingrich, came to me and said, "I'd like you to chair the House Education Subcommittee." And my initial reaction was, why me? What have I done wrong? But he and his staff explained to me that they knew my background. I've been a school board member and two-term school board president, just like Diane in my home community. And they wanted me to take the chairmanship of that committee because we were intent at that point in at least downsizing, if not dismantling altogether, the unconstitutional U.S. Department of Education. We couldn't get rid of it altogether, although we promised to in the Contract with America, because Bill Clinton was in the White House. So we did the next best thing. We took all of those federal education programs and systematically turned them into block grants. And we were headed in the right direction. Oh, by the way, we also balanced the federal budget. The only time in modern history where we actually reduced federal government spending and the size and the scope and the reach and the power of the federal government. When I left Congress in 1998 to keep my term limits commitment, the federal budget was balanced. It generated surpluses for 4 consecutive years thereafter, and we had fundamentally reformed welfare by imposing time limits and work requirements on able-bodied welfare recipients. But we did convert those programs into block grants. I know those programs backwards and forwards, and what's happened since I left Congress in 1998, of course, federal programs have gotten more and more prescriptive. They provide a relatively small amount of the overall funding for K-12 education, yet they dictate and certainly in the case of Common Core, the standards and tests that we will use to educate our kids. And how insidious is it? Well, I always carry this quote with me. We've had a lot of forums and debates. The gubernatorial candidates for the Republican nomination, you know, one of them is a big supporter of Common Core, what he prefers to call Arizona's college and career ready standards. I have some other opponents who give the impression that they're opposed to Common Core, but won't take a firm stance and won't explain to you, because you're entitled to know, the voter, before you make your decision. They won't explain exactly what steps they'll take to get rid of it. A week ago tonight, I asked at a forum in Scottsdale, I asked Mr. Ducey, state treasurer, never held legislative office, never had to cast a single tough vote. My first votes as a member of Congress, by the way, were on the first Persian Gulf War resolution. And my last votes as a member of Congress were on the articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton. And those are tough votes. The first case involves war and peace and life and death, and you're putting young men and women and our military in harm's way. And in the latter case, you're voting to impeach a sitting United States president. So I have a deep, proven record, in fact, 3,000 plus votes. But my point is, I asked at that forum a week ago tonight, I asked it, you say that you oppose Common Core, tell us tonight, since you've dodged the question repeatedly at every single forum and debate, tell us exactly what steps you'll take to get rid of Common Core. And he didn't. He wouldn't. So, you know, folks, I just want to be very clear, because I hope this comes up in our Q&A, that I said I'm going to use the executive authority of the governor's office to get rid of Common Core, because Common Core represents the further federalization of K-12 education, the nationalization of standards and tests that we're going to use to educate our kids. And there are people that maintain, well, you can have national standards and tests and you can still have curriculum decisions made at the local level. Baloney. Bill Gates says, when the tests are aligned to the Common Core standard, the curriculum will line up as well. Bill Gates, the big funder, right? So there's no possible way that that's the case. We have to rip it out by the roots. So I'm going to do that. But you know what? I'm not going to wait until I take the oath of office and assume that office. The day after the general election, I'm going to make it very clear to the appointees, the gubernatorial appointees on the State Board of Education, that I expect their resignation. Any incoming governor has the right to demand the resignation of the appointees of the prior governor, and in this case, her administration, so that you can form your own team. You can have your own people on there. And Diane's already explained that the current makeup or composition of the State Board does not comply with our state constitutional mandate as to the composition of the State Board. And then I'm going to work with Senate President Biggs, because I understand, having served in the highest legislative body in our country, that the legislative branch and executive branch of government are co-equal partners. In fact, the legislative branch is one of its chief responsibilities is to impose restraints on the executive branch under our elaborate federal and state system of checks and balances. But I'm going to work with Andy as a partner and a colleague, and with Judy and the other members of the state legislature. We're going to defund Common Core. We're going to save the taxpayer, and I think there's varying estimates as to the actual cost, but we're going to save the taxpayers the hundreds of millions of dollars that it will take to continue with the full implementation of Common Core. And we're going to restore local control and decision-making in K-12 education. We're going to protect parental rights and parental school choice. We're going to protect charter school autonomy, and we're going to protect homeschooling. And again, you have my word, my solemn oath on that. I'm prepared to do this job. I have the background. I can walk my talk when I say that I'll be the education governor. I understand the governor has to be able to do more than one thing at a time. So public safety, of course, is the first and most important responsibility of state government. But K-12 education is a very close second, because we're talking about, obviously, the future of our kids and our grandkids and our destiny as a state and as a country. So it's good to be with you tonight. I look forward to your questions and answers. I'd be happy to get into a little bit more detail about the documents, the agreements that got us into Common Core, and how we can get out of those documents, those agreements, and out of Common Core. But you have my commitment to do just that.
I think we should give another round of applause to our educational panel. very appreciative of the message and information you gave us tonight. I feel much more educated tonight. Now, I have questions, and the first round of questions here are all, believe it or not, directed at you three. Yeah. And here's the first question. I consider the three of you the foremost experts on Common Core, and was surprised you were not part of the We Will Not Conform event last week. Number one, were you invited to participate? And two, what did you think of the event, or do you know anything about the event?
I guess it works. I was considering going there, and then eventually I think my accent didn't work out well. In any case, I watched it on the movie screen. It's not too many. This is Northern California, very liberal. I think it's very important. It's very important in the sense that the message is going far and wide.
Yes.
Until now, the message, as emotional as it was and as detailed as it was limited in reach. So I have high hopes that it will reach much wider audience, even though the actual details there may have been not so many. But for large audiences, you cannot have too many details.
Thank you. Dr. Milgram, this one is for you. In the documentary Building the Machine, you explained that states that accepted Common Core also agreed to require their universities to accept students who passed a Common Core exit exam and only give math courses for credit. How will this affect our 3 state universities and our community colleges?
That's an interesting question, because this is an interesting and unusual state. Very good. Is it on? Very good. How will it affect them? Well, less than in most every other state.
Speak into the microphone directly. I can't get closer.
Okay, this might be better.
Yes.
Yeah. So in Arizona, your colleges and universities, your in particular Arizona State and the University of Arizona, are the only ones that Seb and I found 4 years ago when we looked at this, that only required a minimum amount of mathematics for admission. And as a result, there will be less change in Arizona than in any other state in the country. In every other state in the country, you are dropping at least one assumption, that is, a course of geometry at the level of trigonometry or above in mathematics. In every other public university in the country, at least a third year of high school math is required. And that means, in effect, the minimum amount that a student would have for admission would be trigonometry, and for many cases, well beyond that, but not in Arizona. So, Arizona will be affected less than any other state that we're aware of, and for some reason, maybe that's not so surprising, because the main writer of the Common Core happens to be from University of Arizona.
So what you're saying is our standards were already lower to get into your university.
You could interpret it that way.
All right, Dr. Milgram, back to you again. Oh, come on now. Are you acquainted with Dr. Craig Barrett, who taught engineering at Stanford University, along with being the co-chair of Achieve, Inc.? He's very involved in Arizona politics and is endowed at Arizona State University. Well, do you know why he would be so pro-Common Core and yet be a supporter of higher education?
Actually, yes, I do know Craig Barrett, not through his work at Stanford, although I was aware of it, but because of that we together have been together at a number of national forums and meetings and things like that, and mostly we agreed in the sense that both of us saw the absolute urgency of getting our students to the point where they could actually go into STEM in an effective way, since STEM is the direction of our economic future. And I was really surprised that Craig Barrett is such a supporter of Common Core. It wasn't expected. And I must say that Craig Barrett is a very smart guy. And generally, he's very, very careful, and he knows what he's doing when he makes a decision. So he must have decided that there are other reasons why he supports it. I can't, as I've indicated, but that's just me.
Thank you, Dr. Stotsky. Thank you for coming tonight. You mentioned 5 people refused to sign off on Common Core. Who were the other 3 and where are they from?
One of the other 3, Dylan William, we heard from. He is at the University of London, and I think he may be, he's back in the U.S. At Rutgers. Okay. He was connected with ETS at the time we had the validation committee meetings. He refused to sign off, as he told me in a follow-up note when I asked him if he were free to tell reasons why. He happens to have a strong math and science, first at Oxford, I believe. He was educated in England, and agreed with Professor Milgram about the weakness of the Common Core standards. The other 2 we never heard from. I tried to find out from them. One of them is a mathematics education professor at the University of Delaware. Do not know why he did not sign off. And the 5th person was from Australia. Why he was on the panel to begin with was a question. Never heard from him. Do not know why. So those are the 5.
Thank you. Now, this question, I guess, is related to that. It says 25 members on the Standards Validation Committee, 24 agreed, 5 disagreed. And the question is this now, quoted because I'm not quite sure what the objective is. How does that make the professor's opinion valid? And it doesn't identify which professors, and since it isn't, this is me answering that question. If it's an opinion, then all opinions are valid, but any response at all?
We probably said this already, and in my opening remarks, I mentioned that I was the only English language arts standards expert, and Professor Milgram was the only mathematician. There were 8 other people who are called math experts on Jeb Bush's Foundation for Excellence website, but they all have appointments in an education school. So what does it mean if all the others sign off and the only people who are experts do not sign off?
What do you feel is the point of this obvious dumbing down with Common Core? Why would the people who created the standards want to dumb down our children? Do you have an opinion, an idea?
I will take a stab at that, and I think that everybody should take a stab at that. Because this goes to the core of the question. I mean, we are arguing one way, other people are arguing other way. I mean, overall, people are not stupid. How can it be? How can it be that you expect Algebra 1 to define college readiness? I mean, you're not stupid, so why did you say so? There must be a reason. I find 2 reasons in my mind. One is, I will mention the name, but Mark Tucker for many, many years believed that we have to educate our students to be workers in the workforce, not necessarily aspire to open-ended liberal education. When he just recently published, again, that algebra is plenty sufficient to enroll in community college. And most of our workforce employees should go through community colleges. So that's how it started. Jim Milgram pushed it a bit higher through his rabble-rousing before they stopped his ability to do that. But that's how it started, and that's really what drives this side of it. The second issue is that Common Core was made as a, and Sandra Stotsky mentioned that, it became instead replacing the high school graduation. But it's really not about high school graduation, it's about college readiness. So, does every college graduate has to be, a high school graduate has to be college ready? Since when? We don't expect everybody to go to college. Why should they be college ready? They should graduate high school. But it sounded noble, so they set this appealing goal. But then reality hit. Well, obviously not everybody can go to college. We may at most have 70-75% really students that are college ready, but we cannot fail 65% of high school students to graduate high school. Well, we have to lower the expectation. We call it college readiness, but it's a dumbed down so-called college readiness, because we cannot fail 65% of high school students.
I would only add that I think there was a component in the group of people finally chosen to develop the standards, whether the idea was there 7 years ago, when the idea of national standards began to become a little bit clearer in a lot of people's minds as to what they thought was a need for this country to improve the school system. I think those who finally ended up being in the driver's seat, so to speak, of choosing the people, and Gates in particular, and I do not understand his reasons at all myself, since I do not know him, but I think what they call a social justice component was a part of it. How do you close the so-called gaps? And if you have lower standards for going to college, and then once you're in college, make sure that the retention rate is kept at a certain level so that they're through, you then have the opportunity to claim that your gaps are closed. This became the overriding concern while I was on the Massachusetts Board of Education. It was not how to raise achievement, but how to close gaps. And those are two different directions.
Thank you. Okay, and I'll just add one remark to it. There, when this is something well worth looking up on your own. The key words here, the thing that this is called, the policy is called in the world of K-12 education in the education schools is efficiency. So look up efficiency as it refers to education, and when you read what it says, you'll see almost the direct plan of what Common Core is designed to do.
I want to
Just add to that conversation for just a second. This what I'm holding in my hand is Appendix U, Common Core Documents, Executive Summary, pages 59 and 60. It's attached to our Race to the Top state grant application. Now this document is basically a short explanation or justification, depending on your point of view,
for Common
for
developed by
the Council of Chief State School Officers, the National Governors Association, as our
distinguished speakers have said.
sorry, and in partnership with Achieve, ACT, and the College Board, okay? But it says, why is this initiative important? Quote, currently every state has its own set of academic standards, meaning public education students in each state are learning to different levels. There's something wrong with that? I thought K-12 education was a fundamental responsibility of state government. All students must be prepared to compete with not only their American peers in the next state, but with students from around the world. These standards will help prepare students with the knowledge and skills they need to succeed in college and careers and to be prepared to compete globally. Globally, we're going to ship our kids to be part of a workforce in foreign countries. It's the camel's nose under the tent. It is a rationalization for the federalization of K-12 education. You know, the other thing that this document says, it just chaps my hide, pardon my French, says what happens after the Common Core standards are developed. Quote, adoption of the Common Core standards is voluntary for states. I want to say that again. Adoption of the Common Core standards is voluntary for states. The document that follows this in the appendix to the Race to the Top grant application is the document, the memorandum of agreement signed by Governor Brewer and then Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Horn. This was, you know, before the standards. Anybody had ever had any look at the draft standards? But it too says this effort is voluntary for states, and it is fully intended that the states adopting the Common Core standards may choose to include additional state standards beyond the Common Core standards. I don't know how anything that on its face is so explicitly voluntary became so explicitly mandatory and compulsory. So we're going to hold the feds to their words. We're going to hold these organizations to their words. It's voluntarily, so we're going to voluntarily choose to withdraw.
I have kind of a bit different take on where this is and how it's all evolved. And I think there's two competing things going on here, and partly from my study of the history of the American education system, progressives make no secret about what they're going to do. Never have, never will. 100 years ago, they changed the way we train our teachers, and they created colleges of education, and they very clearly stated that the goals of that type of teacher training was to change American society. So we have two competing factions, I believe, going on here. An ivory tower of colleges of education who want to use that system to change what our society will be and how it will become. And then on the other hand, there's a group of people that, quite frankly, want to make a whole lot of money. We have $600 billion to be grabbed in education. And that's why we reform our education system consistently about every 6, 8, 10 years. Sell more textbooks, sell more programs, sell more this, sell more that, and none of it's in the best interest of our children, and that's why we have to reclaim our education system.
This next question is for any member of the panel up here that wishes to speak to it. And it goes something like this. Some governors have responded to Common Core. Who do you think is taking the best approach? And they actually have given you multiple choice questions. A would be Bobby Jindal, B, Mary Fallon, C, Mike Pence. I know this is a favorite of Dr. Stotsky's, Mike Pence. And D, Scott Brown. So, all I can tell you is it says Scott Brown here. Scott Brown Walker. So, anybody want to take that one?
Sure, that's easy. That's easy. That's as easy. I can get that one. It's Scott Walker because he kept Wisconsin out on the Common Core in the first place. And Jindal, of course, has had to reverse himself. Oh, I thought he did. All right, we'll pass the microphone over there. Okay.
I think Mary Fallon in Oklahoma, she did the best game. Because what happens is, most states in the country have no child left behind waivers. And they like the waivers. It doesn't give them much more money. It's really the flexibility of the money that they get already. But it's convenient and they can change things, so they like it. Part of the waiver is you have to have so-called college and career-ready standards. Why do I say so-called? Because if you're called Common Core, you are automatically college and career-ready, by definition. If you back off, you have to replace it with your own standards, but you have to get your colleges to certify them as college and career-ready. So that's an amount of work. You can be done, but you know. When you withdraw, you have a very short time to replace them. You used to have Common Core for the last 3-4 years. Now you're rushing to committees and seem to finish something in 6 weeks. It's a crazy race, a foolish race. Don't do it. What Oklahoma did said very simply, okay, we are out. We fall back on the previous standard, previous test, we don't care. Now we'll take our sweet time, a year and a half, 2, and we work on it as we should have from day one, rather than accept the fake stuff coming from Washington. So that's the way to do it, not what Pence did. Oh, we'll work it quickly, and then we end up with, excuse me, the same thing, Renee, actually worse, and other people.
Thank you. Okay. Everyone's shaking their head yes, or they've gone to sleep on the panels.
Well, that's what you should do. I mean, you have to give it some time.
Everyone seems to agree with that. Well, here we go. Why did the NGA create Common Core? I think we did this one kind of, what was their motive? I think we kind of, National Government Association, you want to talk?
Well, those were the two organizations that were willing to cooperate together, accept Gates money, and sponsor the project, as far as we know. I don't know that there were other organizations that were willing to do this, but I'm not knowledgeable about anymore.
So they took you.
There is a sickness when you live in Washington, and it hits you once you settle down there. I was there for less than 2 years, and I still got sick. Basically, it goes like this. Well, I'm here in the center of the universe. Somebody, in the first months, I heard the expression, 25 square miles surrounded by reality. I'm sure. Anyway, you sit there, and you think, well, I'm here. Clearly, I'm the smartest person around. So how do I go about telling those yokes in the country what to do? Because I know what to do. It's they don't get it. Well, I'm joking, obviously, the way I'm telling the story. But the point is, you have organizations sitting in Washington for decades. And they are basically clubby place for the governors to chat and dream of some common initiatives. Superintendents dream of the same. Achieve was scheduled, they started 15, by now 20 years ago almost, to actually promote common national standard, because there must be centralized, because, hey, it has to be us controlling it.
Right.
You mean there are laws that don't allow the education department to do controlling? Okay, we'll plan on it, call it voluntarily. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Achievement, actually interesting project, American Diploma project for many years, trying to promote voluntary, truly voluntary standard. But then came the crisis. And suddenly they got the stimulus, $800 billion. And the Department of Ed got about 100 billion of them. And about 5 total billion was kind of free. $5 billion of free money, not allocated. Wow, we can do a lot of things with it. And the rest is history.
Well, and I was just going to add to that, if you take a step back a little bit further, a couple of years before that, and I think it was 2006, 2007, before the National Governors Association got involved, there's a organization, it's Governor Hunt, and it's out of Virginia, Hunt Education Excellence or something like that. I apologize that I don't remember it exactly right now. But basically what they did was they commissioned a study of standards across the nation to create a crisis that then they got Bill Gates involved to solve.
That's part of the same thing. If there is no crisis, I cannot help you. But I want to help you. Trust me, I'm smart.
And then this question is, how and why were Professors Mugam and Stotsky chosen to serve on the validation committee in the first place?
Okay. It came as a complete surprise to me. There are most of the members of the validation committee were nominated by the states. Each state was allowed to nominate one individual to serve on the validation committee. there were a certain number of people like Linda Darling Hammond, who was Obama's chief education advisor, and she obviously was ex officio on the committee. There were others of that type, but otherwise than that, each state nominated one person. Now, certain states are more important to the people who are the politicians who look at the effect of things, and one of the states that's incredibly important is California. So I was nominated by California, but nobody told me. If they had told me there's no way in hell that I would have gone along with it. But they didn't tell me. And so all of a sudden I get this letter from the governors saying, you're on the validation committee if you want to be. And at that point, I was on the writing committee for the core standards, but I wasn't real happy with the way things were looking. So this looked, as I told you about the charge of validation, this looked like a much more reasonable way to have some real say in what the standards would look like. And so that's why I was on.
I wanted to be on the final committee because I wasn't on either of the other two. And so I kept hounding poor Mitchell Chester, who is the Commissioner of Education in Massachusetts, and I was on the state board and had been on the search committee that hired him, so he owed me a favor. So I kept nagging him to put me on the validation committee. Every week he would call up Washington, and they were courting Massachusetts because they wanted Massachusetts to abandon its standards and adopt Common Core. And then he would tell me that he had told Washington he wanted me, and I would call him every week to remind him. And then the day before nominations closed, he called and said he finally got me on the committee. And I'm sure he rues the day.
That was a dream come true for him. Now, there's a series of questions here that I think are really related, so I'm going to read all three of them because I think they kind of get at the same idea. One would be, what are our rights for opting out of testing, and how will that affect our children and their grades? Secondly, how can parents in Arizona opt their children out of the test? Again, what are the impacts of that? And the third one is similar. In the state of Arizona, can students boycott standardized testing, and what are the legal rights? And so I think that's being driven a little bit by the Glenn Beck thing the other night. So, Dr. Moody.
Well, we don't know what your legal rights are here. But what I did do was somebody who shall remain nameless, did a very careful research into the laws in California and created an opt-out form together with a handout explaining the particular laws that could be quoted if it was necessary. So the legal basis was there, and the form was there that parents could easily fill out. And what we're going to do in California is that's going to be incredibly widely distributed, and we'll just see where it goes. But you have to, there obviously be different laws with different numbers on them in Arizona, but what I did do was I brought a copy of the document I just described, and there are copies of it out there or otherwise available. People can tell you about that. So that's probably the best and safest way to approach it. At least that's the best and only way I know.
I would only add that the basic right of parents to keep their children from going to school on any particular day has always been there, and they can do it at any time. So they can opt their kid out. They don't have to ask for permission. There are some school committee systems in Massachusetts that have said that students, they have voted as school committees, that parents can opt their kids out because many of these school committee members have children in the schools, have opted their own kids out. So they have allowed it. But parents don't need to ask for permission. because they do it already. If they want to go on a vacation or the kid's sick, you just keep your kid home and send an excuse. Now, if you want to send your kid to school with a note that says he is not or she is not to take the test, but I want instruction to take place, I don't want the kid put in a closet for the day, that parents can also do, because there have been some incidents reported around the country of schools that punished the child who was sent to school but not allowed by the parent to take the test. Parents still have the same rights they have always had. So they should have to ask for those rights. But the question of the school administering the test, when the real one comes along, not the pilot ones, parents can still do what they want and say, I don't want my child to take the test when it is given. The policy of whether there's to be any punishment to the child, for example, that it might be part of their GPA or in some other thing that might be done, is a school committee policy. And when someone has raised the question about the superintendent setting it, I've said it's got to be a school board policy. It can't be set by a superintendent because they're not supposed to be setting policy. So that would have to be looked at carefully if a school official or teacher tried to punish a child or a parent for keeping this. We don't know. These are things to be played out.
I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but, and we do have great parental rights here in Arizona. Unfortunately, back in 2005, there was a lawsuit that went through the courts in California. It was called Fields v. Palmdale. And basically, it was an argument that parents had with their school district over sex education. And the children were exposed to some information without the parents' knowledge and without their ability to opt out. As these things sometimes happen, it spiraled up through the court system, and it actually landed in the Ninth Circuit Court. And what they ruled in that court case was that parents lose their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse door. They said a parent has a right to choose their child's school, but once that school is chosen, they lose their constitutional rights. Now, silly me, I always thought our rights came from God and the Constitution protected them, but apparently the Ninth Circuit knows different. From what I studied when I went through many law conferences, was that this decision was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court refused to hear it. Now, we didn't see a lot of problems with it here in Arizona, but we could under Common Core, because if a whole bunch of parents come and say, we want to opt our children out of this, or a parent comes and says, I want to opt my child out of everything, or all the Common Core, what could happen is that school districts could say one of two things. They could say, well, take your child and leave and enroll them in another school. Well, with Common Core being everywhere, where are you going to take your child, number one? And number two, because we tie our funding to the number of bodies that sit in a seat, they're never going to tell you to take your child out of school. But they will say, sue us, knowing full well that there is this precedent. So in the Ninth Circuit, although we've not seen it pushed and used too much, it is a threat, I believe, that is out there. So we have to be very careful. We have to work with our legislature to try and improve our parents' rights and make sure that we protect them as best we can. But this is a threat. And again, it was Fields v. Palmdale. It's from 2005.
Thanks. Now, as I'm just the moderator, but I'm going to weigh in as the Senate President for a second and just talk about it as a state legislator. What we're talking about here, about opting out for parents in a protest way, and what the comment I heard at the Glenn Beck thing was that one of their policy experts, one of their area experts, said that every state you can opt out at every level, but we are actually researching this at the state Senate right now, because I don't believe that is the case. I think we may need to have a statutory change, and it would be following something like what California has, where the parent can opt out. I prefer to do something called an opt-in, but I'm always the most radical, and that is to say, if you really want your kid to take the Common Core test, you have to opt in. This is at home, and everybody's having to but that's just me. So I'm just going to make a plug here. That's why you need 17, or we have 17 Republicans in the state Senate. You need 16, 31, and 1 to make that happen. What that means, you need 16 senators who will vote for such an idea, 31 representatives that will, then you need a governor who will sign that to make that go in and be willing to fight that. You'll need an attorney general who will be prepared to defend that when that goes to court. That's why elections are so incredibly important. And so that's back to the moderating panic. This one says, I am opposed to the data collection portion of Common Core. How do I help my kids out of the data collection portion? That one.
Is this? Yeah. Unfortunately, you really have no choice and no way to opt out since the FERPA was changed. FERPA was reinterpreted in 2011 at this point, I think, if I remember. And it essentially took away certain rights of parents of withhold or need for parent permission to pass information. The consortium, TAP and Smarter Balance, both of them signed an agreement with the U.S. Department of Education committing to transfer individual student records to the U.S. Department of Education. Never happened before. And unless you have a state law that was very careful, much not relying on FERPA, but explicit state law that says you cannot do this and that, and you are not part of the consortium, because the consortium has a backdoor agreement already. But if you take a contractor, directly you have a contract with a contractor, not with this consortium that has another deal, and you make sure that the data stays within the contractor, because it's your data, just the contractor holds it for the purpose of analysis, reporting, and so on and so forth, then you can do it as a state. But individual parent has no way to prohibit it.
Just on that point, that is the lone bill that reached the governor's desk this last session of the 6 bills dealing with Common Core. And it was to prevent that from happening, the transfer of data. And in fact, we were trying to prevent data collection entirely. But the governor vetoed that bill that was passed. So we have a problem. We're going to have to make another run at that bill again, another piece of that legislation. How can I fight Common Core while I am in high school? I'm looking for the youngest person here.
This is very, very important because much of the animus against Common Core comes when parents see the samples of work. They see the samples and they go ballistic. They go right in the face and say, that can't stand. And that's exactly how we should continue this battle. How do we get this material? Because students share it with their parents and with their parents' friends. Most students, just do their homework, don't bother their parents don't bother them, everybody's happy. No. If the students want to help collect this kind of annoying examples and bring them home, bring them to your friends, publish it, bring it to your local newspaper. They will be happy to publish it.
Dr. Stotsky, over here.
There's another aspect, because I was involved over 20 years ago in Brookline at a time when there was a controversy with the Social Studies Department, and the high school students, what was at issue was the survival of an AP European history course. To get to the end of this story, which was very complicated and it lasted for several years, the high school students who wanted that course found that there was a state law that said that if X number of high school students signed a petition for a course, the school committee would have to allow them to have the course, and that is what they did. Now, I don't know whether there are similar statutes like that elsewhere, but students are supposed to be taught about civic participation, and this is an avenue for high school students for, say, a math course that might not be there, or a good high school English course in grade 11 and 12 that would be more demanding in Common Core. And if it's possible for students to sign a petition, which they did, and they contacted the Attorney General's office, they were very successful, and the school committee just folded because the students were there asking for it, not their parents.
One thing about what you both said is there has been a lot of publicity generated when parents see the work that's been called upon. I'll just relate to you that a lot of the times in post-secondary ed, there are actually, through social media, you have a lot of students in universities who are, quite frankly, they're surreptitiously videotaping some of their instructors. They're bringing the documents that they're being asked to review, and as soon as they begin publishing that, all of a sudden there's a retrenchment coming from some of these professors because there's an embarrassment and because there's public outrage and what you see going on in the universities as well. So that type of organization or organized effort could also be used here. Here's one: if you could only make one recommendation to the average citizen to stop or change Common Core, what would it be? You only get one. Frank wants to say something.
Yeah, I whispered to Andy, get involved in politics. You know, joking aside, folks, elections have very real consequences. And I can tell you, as a former United States Congressman, politics drives policy. And I don't think I get any argument from Andy or Judy, anyone that's served in elective office. The good news is it almost goes to, you know, I think what I'm hearing is what can the average citizen do? Or you can certainly get involved in our political process. You're doing that by being here tonight because we've covered both policy and we've gotten into the political realm as well. But there's a move afoot across this state and across this land. You know, you heard about the soccer moms a few years ago? Well, look out, because the Common Core moms are coming to a movie theater in the student. And that's as legitimate, that's a bottom-up grassroots movement. It's powerful. So, Mike, if you can do one thing and one thing only, make your voice heard, make your vote count in this election. Early voting has started by mail ballot and will continue up to the primary election day. And hopefully make, you know, smart decisions and put people there that will work with Andy as the Senate President, get to that governing majority that we need in the state legislature to be able to address these concerns, to be able to empower and entrust parents again. The first, most important, lifelong teacher, that the empowerment and entrusting parents, of course, the whole education system should be based on that. So we want to put the parents back in charge, like I said earlier, and we want to reclaim our legitimate state government responsibility for the education of our kids by listening to parents and empowering them.